They met her first as a suitcase rolling over tile. Eleanor Archer, 27, British, a freelance mapmaker of places nobody asked for, alleys, stairwells, markets that only existed when the wind was kind. She wore a woven cotton bracelet her younger brother had tied onto her wrist the day she left Manchester, a faded yellow sundress under a denim jacket that had learned the weight of cameras, and a pair of salt-stained sandals that squeaked when wet. In her daypack lived a paperback that smelled like a library basement, John Berger's essays marked with pencil stars, and a battered enamel mug where she made tea from bags she brought everywhere because hotel kettles differed, but a mug could make anywhere civil. She slipped a square vintage photograph in the book as a bookmark. Her parents on a beach in 1989, her mother squinting into sun, her father holding her as a toddler up to the wind. When the receptionist at the Lion's Head Lodge on Long Street, Cape Town, asked for a passport and then a smile, Eleanor gave both, and then said she would like a room with a window that opened because night air and city noise were a way to know where you were. The city was doing what it always did in late summer. Damp sea breath in the mornings, mountain shadow stretching like a cathedral nave in the evenings. The wind coming over Table Mountain. Cape Doctor, locals would say, the one that makes you believe it might clean the whole place if you give it a minute, tugged linen off balconies and teased gulls across the bright. The Lion's Head Lodge had once been respectable, then cheap, then fashionable again in the circular logic of travel. Its rooftop tanks a pair of corrugated cylinders bolted into a concrete cradle where pigeons supervised the sunrise. From the roof, one could see bow cap houses blinking in candy colors, the spine of Kloof Neck running toward the 12 Apostles, distant cranes in the working harbor shrugging at the day. Eleanor set her mug by the window, unpacked with the neatness of someone who likes rooms to trust her, and walked out into the afternoon with her camera on its strap and her book in the bag, because reading in strange cafes was her way of asking a city what it meant by itself. The maid on the 5th floor noticed Eleanor's coffee cup 2 days later, filled not with coffee, but milky tea, lipstick print faint, set on the desk beside a notebook where small lines had been drawn like streets. The bracelet, green, red, yellow, was on her wrist when she went out that evening to photograph the blue hour into Waterkant. She wrote to her brother from the bar she chose for its view of Signal Hill. I'll take the cable car tomorrow if the wind behaves. This place tastes like salt and coriander and something sweet I can't name. Tell Mom I'm wearing the sunblock, promise. She took a photograph of herself in the elevator mirror that night, laughing because an insect tried to raise her reflection between floors, and she sent it with a caption, proof of life. The timestamp would later matter more to other people than it meant to her. The next morning, she bought peaches at the Oranjesic market and accidentally learned a street vendor's daughter's name by the simple method of listening longer than most tourists do. She went to the District 6 Museum and sat on the floor with her notebook open because loss is easier to measure sitting down. She drank rooibos on the hotel stoop and drew lines from memory. Late in the afternoon, she returned to change into her swimsuit because the sea at Clifton had looked like a dare. In the elevator, a boy of 8 in a Sharks jersey grinned up at her and told her the pool on the roof was not a pool at all, just 2 huge tanks for the water that went to the taps and showers. She laughed and said everything here was a little closer to the sky than in Manchester. The boy got out at 3. She continued to 5. The camera on the strap knocked gently against her ribs. She keyed into her room, set the camera on the bed, anchored it with the book, peeled out of the sundress, and put on a plain blue one-piece suit that had seen many oceans. She wrapped a towel around her waist, slipped into her sandals, took her enamel mug, because she liked to drink cool rooftop water as if it were a ritual, and walked down the hall toward the service stairs that led to the hatch and then into light. The last image of her is a pane of elevator glass turned into a mirror, a woman grinning, hair damp with the mountain's honest humidity, fingers lifting a strand away from her eyes. The last sound, if anyone had been listening at the service door, was shoes scuffing concrete and the hatch clicking, then wind practicing its scales across surfaces. The hotel learned of her absence before anyone named it as such. She missed the afternoon whale-watching tour she had booked 2 days prior. The operator called the room. The desk phoned up. The phone rang until fatigue asked it to be quiet. The maid found the bed made. The book face down like a bird that had settled its wings, the camera sleeping, the photograph used as a bookmark half fallen out. The enamel mug was on the sill, ring of tea invisible and permanent. On the bathroom rail, a damp towel whispered that it had been elsewhere and returned. The denim jacket lay on the chair with its pockets empty except for a receipt for peaches and a ticket stub from a museum. The bracelet was absent because it was on the wrist that had gone with her. The desk manager, a man who had learned to speak kindly to panic, called the number on the registration card. Eleanor's brother answered from a different time zone and made a sound that people make when their stomach discovers it is heavier than gravity. The desk manager called the police. The police called the hotel's security company, the one that knows the weight of levers and the schedules of lifts. Two officers arrived with notebooks and the patient tone of men who had seen rooms wait. They looked first in the place everyone asks them to look, camera footage. The lobby was generous with angles because thefts like to practice ballet. On the screen, Eleanor entered, and then entered again, and then returned with a paper bag and smiled at the porter. She pressed the elevator key. The elevator's small camera caught her reflected life. She ran her fingers through her hair. She adjusted the strap across her shoulder. She looked at herself the way people do when they are about to be alone and want to know if their face is being kind. The elevator opened on 5. She walked into the corridor, turned right. The camera in the hallway saw her cross its field and nod at the painting that nobody ever noticed. She disappeared at the far turn. A minute later, the service door camera recorded motion. The metal shutter to the roof access shifted, as if air had learned to use hands. There was no camera on the roof. The manager had wanted one, the budget had not. The officers did what training asks. They knocked. They knew the sound of nobody answering and noted that this was that sound. They asked the housekeeping manager to open adjacent rooms. They found a Swedish couple reading the same book in different translations, a businessman asleep with shoes on, a student from Durban crying into her phone because exams had always been a species of weather. They checked the fire stairs and the laundry. The security contractor climbed to the roof with his torch and his hangover and found nothing he did not expect. 2 tanks, one labeled A, one B. The access hatch secure on both. The pigeons annoyed. The Cape doctor having it say. He called down that it was clear. The report grew by customs. Person missing. Last seen on floor 5. Last clear image elevator mirror. Tourist female. Age 27. British. Clothing unknown at time of disappearance. Possibly swimwear. Personal effects left in room. Camera, jacket, notebook, book, enamel mug, photograph. The desk produced the passport which held its own small biography on one line. Place of birth, parents' distant addresses, expiration date like a spell. The brother sent a list of visible scars, one childhood bicycle fall at the knee, allergies, none, and the shoe size of someone who liked to walk. He also sent a description of the bracelet because people believe objects know loyalty. For 2 days the city volunteered as cities sometimes do. Hostile bulletin boards carried her photograph. A local radio station asked if any jogger on the promenade had noticed a blue-suited woman watching the sea. The police checked hospitals, morgues, jails, shelters, clinics, the quiet rooms where some people go to change names without telling paperwork. Taxi drivers were asked if anyone had been dropped at Lion's Head late at night. One said he had taken a woman in a yellow dress to the base of the cable car station 2 days earlier. The timestamp gave a liar away. The desk compiled a list of calls to the room. The whale tour, the brother, an English number that called twice and then stopped, a South African number that belonged to nobody when called back. The maid cried because missing is heavier than dead when you work in a place that sells sleep. On the 4th day, a guest in 502 called the desk to say the tap water smelled odd, like pennies or old wet rope. The desk sent maintenance to check the filters, the pressure regulator, the pipes in the chase. The maintenance man ran the tap and sniffed, frowned, ran it again, wrote a ticket. Roof tanks? He went up the service stairs with his tool bag. The wind was busy. It ruffled his paperwork and suggested the sea as a solution to everything. He walked past the satellite dishes and the squat metal boxes with locks like frowns, past a stained rectangle where some contractor had left paint to dye, to the 2 tanks that held the hotel's throat. Tank A's hatch screws were rusty but obedient. Tank B's needed more talking to. He lifted A's lid and shone his torch. The water smelled like the inside of an umbrella. He lowered the lid and tried B. When the hatch scraped and he leaned over, the first thing he saw was a dark shape beneath the meniscus that the mind calls laundry for a generous second before honesty suggests a different word. He said the name you say in this country when you have not brought any gods with you. He put the torch in his mouth and held it like a fisherman, and with both hands lifted the hatch entirely away. The smell that rose was explanation and accusation. The police returned with a different kind of notebook. Firefighters arrived with equipment, not because there was fire, but because their ladders know how to be gentle and their hands know how to move the heavy portions of fate. The hotel manager stood at the roof door and did arithmetic in Panic's language. Guests, rooms, refunds, liability, press. The maintenance man sat on a coil of cable and did not speak. They lowered a retrieval hook and then did not use it because the body, what remained of it, was delicate. They used canvas and patience and the kind of talk men use when they are keeping each other from being alone inside their heads. When at last the remains were on the roof and then in a bag and then on a gurney, the wind hesitated, as if even the air had been influenced. The medical examiner wrote in a spelling that turned shock into Latin. Skeletal remains predominantly articulated, soft tissue absent, dermal fragments present. Bikini-style swimsuit present, color indeterminate. Personal effects recovered. Woven bracelet from left wrist, no jewelry otherwise. No footwear. no watch. The bracelet was recognized by a brother on a screen that made grief pixelated. Dental comparison with photographs under magnification suggested Eleanor, but the certainty would come from other tests because the city has rules about knowing. The tank told its own partial truth. The hatch showed scuff marks at the edge. The screws had lost paint in places that suggested recent handling. There was no ladder built into the tank. The rim was a difficulty, even for men in boots. The roof had a short parapet and then the sky. Beyond, the street lifted its noise and then dropped it again. There were no cameras in that space. The hotel produced a maintenance log that showed a water level alarm had flickered twice in the past week and been reset, the sort of error that means a sensor has become bored. The staff said nobody had reason to open the hatch. The staff also said staff and reason often travel independently. Witnesses arrived because rumor summons them. A woman in 407 said she had heard footsteps on the roof after midnight 3 nights ago. The sound of something soft dragging on concrete. Then the metal complaint of a hatch. A man in 603 said he had gone up to smoke and found the door locked and believed the management had become puritanical. A barman on Long Street said he had served a young woman who asked too many questions about rooftops and water. A child said he had told a lady in the elevator that the hotel did not have a pool. The security guard on nights said he had walked the stairwell that led to the roof twice and found nothing that wanted to be found. The police wrote it all down because paper does not get bored. Theories came with their own breath. Some said she had climbed into the tank to cool off. A bathtub scaled to hubris. That she had slipped into water and found the edges too high and the lid too heavy and the night too long. Some said someone had helped her into it. Some said she had run from someone, seen the tank like a hiding place, misread oxygen and angles. Some said drugs. Some said madness, a word people use when they are on the wrong side of a locked door. Someone in a nearby bar said the hotel had a curse because once a sailor had died in 1978 under the television in what was now room 211. Someone else said every city has this story and every hotel collects it like dust. The police preferred verbs to adjectives. They looked for signs of a struggle in the corridor. They lifted fingerprints from the hatch. They shone luminol with the whisper of men offering conspiracy a chance to become chemistry. The prints were many, because hands and metal are in love. The chemicals told them what most walls will tell you if asked rudely. That life had been here, in various forms, with various intentions. The elevator video circulated in places beyond the investigation. The way she laughed at her own reflection was turned into music by someone who believed in making things easier to remember. Commenters became the kind of brave that only a keyboard can confer. They observed the way she touched her hair and decided it meant something. They clocked the timing between floors and chose industries of meaning. Nora. There was no Nora here, but the city had its own archivists, an analyst at the SAP's forensic support unit whose job was to know which fragments deserved marriage, watched the video twice, and then looked away because the human face looking at itself is a private sacrament even when performed in public. She preferred to read the tank, the screw heads, the water level alarms, the photographs of the roof hatch in the early hours as if light could confess. Eleanor's notebook was the more honest witness. It contained maps of places that do not see themselves as maps. The angle at which the mountain shadow touches the glass facade across from the lodge at 6:12 p.m. in March. The way the fishmonger's shout travels like a possessive. The two precise benches on the promenade where the world is most likely to forgive you. On the last page a line without title. The city is a glass of water with ice. What floats rises when it melts. The book she carried yielded 3 dog-eared chapters. The enamel mug kept its tea ring. The photograph of her parents continued to be the shape of the hole at the center of a life. Searches were documented with a vocabulary that made grief measurable. Police checked roofs, both those that wanted visitors and those that did not. They asked keys of porters and lies of men who knew how to climb. They checked rooms, closets, stairwells, ductwork, the alley behind the building where a drain says everything in winter and nothing in summer. Divers were not summoned because roofs are not oceans. Volunteers printed flyers that had to be replaced when the wind took the first run and taught them about paper, which learns quickly how to leave. Drone footage of the block revealed nothing except the existence of gulls and numbers that mocked mathematics. When the autopsy became a list rather than a horror, the city spat its theories into order. There were 4 they took seriously because the family had the right to 4 and not fewer. First, misadventure. A woman, encouraged by the heat, climbs to the roof to see the city wide and then by curiosity lifts a hatch. Water offers its invitation. A bath drawn by the sky. Swimwear on body suggests intention. She enters. The world of edges is not a world of ladders. Arms grow tired. The hatch drops. Second, criminal act. Someone accompanies her up. Someone who has used the roof before. A game is suggested. Coercion is guessed at. In the tank, the sound of your own breath becomes monstrous. Third, flight. She has been frightened by something not yet named. She seeks what looks like hiding. Panic is terrible at measuring height. Fourth, complication of the mind. She is overcome by a moment no one expects or adjudicates properly, a moment which, when explained later by strangers, becomes an insult to privacy and a convenience for plots. The investigator, this city's version, patient and careful, added a fifth that she did not publish, that systems fail in chorus. A lock half-broken sings with a policy half-thought which harmonizes with a camera never installed. The song is called Accident, but the choir has many members. Eleanor's brother arrived and signed papers that make mourning legal. He carried out of the room a small parcel: the bracelet, the book, the mug, the photograph. He held the bracelet to his mouth and did not cry in the way films taught him. He breathed as if the air might go somewhere more useful if he sent it quickly enough. He signed a release to allow the hotel to launder the sheets, to make the room neutral again so that some other life could use it. He sat with a detective in a cafe that smelled of cinnamon and disinfectant and asked the cleanest question a person can. Did she jump? The detective said they did not believe so. He asked if someone put her there. The detective said they did not yet know. He asked if people will think they know anyway. The detective said yes. He paid for his tea and his eyes followed the mug to the saucer as if objects could be taught to land more gently. The Lion's Head Lodge's owner met with lawyers. They spoke of liability and duty of care and warned documents about adjectives. A maintenance schedule was drafted that filled holes nobody had thought to admit out loud. The hatches on both tanks were replaced with locking versions. A camera was mounted that saw half the sky. Signs were ordered that told people what they already knew: roof access for staff only. The owner approved a plaque for the lobby because the historian on the city's cultural board said memory must be asked to sit somewhere specific. It read, "In February 2023, the remains of a missing guest, Eleanor Archer, 1995 to 2023, were recovered from a rooftop water tank. May this marker witness the obligations we owe one another wherever we store the things we need to live." The press called the story by the ugliest possible name and scaled it for views. An American program spliced the elevator footage with a composer's idea of dread. A British paper discovered Eleanor's social feed and filled columns with photographs of her smiling beside things. They called her a blogger because that word makes a person into a dossier. Internet detectives did what they do, which is to mistake intimacy for knowledge and timing for proof. An aunt of a friend took 2 days to write a letter no one would publish about how Eleanor had once knitted scarves for a charity store and never counted the hours as a donation. The family held a memorial in Manchester where the rain did a decent job of being supportive and a child asked where the sea was here. Back in the city, water resumed being water. Guests did not complain of smell. Kitchens boiled pasta. Showers hissed. A couple from Pretoria got engaged in 307 with a ring he had badly guessed the size of. A conference on sustainable packaging debated cardboard with passion. A backpacker from Porto fell in love with the mountain and then with a person on a bench below it. The tank was cleaned with chemicals polite enough to speak with, scrubbed by men who had learned to be gentle late in their working lives, and refilled. The pigeons returned with the kind of forgiveness only animals own. A month later, on a Wednesday blown thin by wind, the forensic analyst walked the roof with the maintenance supervisor. They stood by the tank and looked at their own reflections in water that had the decency not to say anything. The analyst asked if anything had changed in the weeks before Eleanor went missing. The supervisor said a sensor had been glitching, that a contractor had been up to replace it, that he had written it down and the paper had the right signature, that sometimes the hatch gets left resting. That is, not latched, because the weight of the lid is confidence enough. The analyst wrote in her book nothing that looked like blame and everything that looked like verbs. She leaned over the hatch and looked down. The thought she did not write: if you were tired, if you were too hot, if you were 27 and the sky looked like it had been drawn for you, you might think this was a reasonable place to cool your skin, just for a minute. When the identification came, DNA confirming what bracelets and teeth already whispered, the family authorized the release of the remains. The funeral home in Sea Point did its quiet work, the sort of labor that hides itself out of respect. The brother returned and collected the box. At the last moment, he asked whether he could keep the bracelet separate. The director, a man who had learned how to give people a yes they didn't realize would cost effort, delivered it in an envelope as if it were a letter bearing good news lost in the mail for decades. On a bench above Sea Point Pool, where kids made the water loud on purpose and older men swam laps that counted as prayer, the brother opened Eleanor's enamel mug and put the bracelet and the photograph inside and closed it. He wrote in his phone something he would send to people who had loved her in dozens of tiny ways. She was found. We are taking her home. Please drink a glass of water for her today. Make it cold if you can. There are always other versions. In one, a man whose face will never be a photograph guides a woman up a stairwell and says, "Come see the view." And the roof is a country that admits them without asking for a passport. And afterward, the night is louder and longer than anyone had planned. And there is a hatch, and water makes its old promise. In another, she is braver than the evening, lifts the lid herself, sits on the rim and lowers into the cool, finds that the steel stings the hands and the shoulders, reaches, slips, knocks the lid down without intending to, calls out once, understands the geometry of boxes. In yet another, she is chased by something nobody else will ever be forced to define, opens the first door that leads out of the map, finds the next door leads higher, and chooses the only dark her body can enter entirely. There's a mean little version in which someone says drugs and writes the ending with that pen. There is a heartbreakingly clean one in which the word accident is the truest noun available. The analyst, who did not believe in ghosts but believed in apologies, wrote one in her report, a sentence that had no legal value, and therefore all the value in the world. We are sorry the door at the top of the world was not kinder. She filed it where it would be kept in a room with other sentences that people might need later. The tank on the roof, as if it had learned something about itself, kept offering water to taps with a humility that did not have to be learned at all. If you stand on the pavement outside the Lion's Head Lodge at 6 in the evening and look up, you will see windows light one at a time, as if the building has remembered to breathe. Someone will set a mug on a sill. Someone will angle a chair toward the mountain as if news might come from it. A delivery scooter will complain at the curb. You might think of a photograph of a woman shading her eyes on a beach in 1989, of a bracelet whose knot no longer opens, of a paperback heavy with pencil stars. You might decide to take the stairs the next time you choose a door. And you might find yourself lifting a glass of cold water, the cheap miracle of a city that sends rivers through walls, and you might say her name, not because you knew her, but because the act of saying makes the glass a better instrument. And then you might drink, and, for a second before the swallow, you might taste the clean metal where stories end and systems begin.